welcome to Phriend of Phimfinch podcast, where we like to talk about all things to do with young people, neurodiversity and the education system. Specifically, we like to talk about alternative provision and how alternative education can be a real opportunity to create alternative pathways for those that don't fit the mainstream model. Hey Caitriona, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. I'm very interested to learn from you because I know that you have home educated your children and you still home educate one of them. And I don't know much about that, but they are, I'm interested. So tell me about how that happened.
How did that happen? Well, it happened very accidentally, as a lot of things in my life happen that way. With a conversation at a playgroup when my eldest was about 4.5 or so, and we were just thinking about popping him into primary school. We lived in Ireland at the time, and something felt really wrong. He is a very sensitive a child, always has been from a very young age. And the thought of popping him into a class of 30, 4 or 5-year-olds just really felt wrong to me, but I didn't see any other option. And a friend at playgroup said to me, but why don't you home education? I didn't really understand the implications of that or how I could even do that. So I put my head down, did some research, talked to lots of people who were doing it. And we thought, okay, well, let's give it a try and see. There's no, we can't really screw this up monumentally. Not at that age anyway, because they're still sort of, learning through play. So we thought, well, let's take it just day by day and see. And that was in 2000. It must have been 2013. He was just about 5. And we're still home educating. We came to the point when COVID hit that I was full-time home educating 3 of them at that stage. And because I then needed to go back to the workplace because we had lost our only income, I needed to put my eldest then into secondary school. Now, that was against his wishes at the time, but he understood why I needed to do that right then. I asked him, to agree to it for a term, and then we'd review it in January. He absolutely hated it and hated me for the beginning part of that school year. But then he actually he's now going into year 9, absolutely loves it, has thrived in it. But his foundation in home education has really served him well. And I'm very proud of the fact that he is somebody who thinks outside the box. He pushes the boundaries. He doesn't accept the status quo. I'm very proud this week. He popped me over his phone earlier in the week and showed me an email that he was about to send to the lady who he works with on his newspaper delivery. And he had constructed this email outlining why he deserved a pay increase. And it wasn't a whingy, whiny email. It was very well constructed. I was like, oh my God, this is like something I'd write. And I was so proud of him. And he had, very logically given her the breakdown of how long it took him for each piece of it and why he deserved a pay increase. And much to my surprise, she came back and agreed that. And I love looking at him, and my daughter now is in secondary education, and seeing that. I think I'm somebody who pushes boundaries, and I like the fact that they are not systemized. They are very much thinking for themselves. And I will put that down to the time that we had together at home, where they saw me constantly modeling that, sometimes, to maybe a little bit too far if I pushed it sometimes. But it's something that's kind of innate in them. So we just have, with my youngest now, he's 9.5, he's in year 5. So I've got 2 years left with him to home educate. And yeah, I think it's something similar to teaching, as you know, and like something like being a nurse. I think it's a bit of a vocation. It's not something that you do half-hearted. I do it with my full heart, knowing that it's the best option for them, and it allows them to have a tailor-made education to suit their needs, their style, and everything. And it just really works for us as a family. So
cool. And how did you know what to deliver? Like, is there a list that exists and you're like, okay, I need to cover XYZ, or how does it work?
Well, there is. I mean, you can access the curriculum very simply, whatever jurisdiction you live in. That's pretty much available online. But what we did in Ireland in the beginning, when we started to home educate, we lived in Ireland. So we checked out what the curriculum was for each year as we went through, and we had an idea in the back of our head. But what I really wanted to get away from was this linear idea that kids learn in a very linear fashion. Think, well, life is not linear, so learning isn't linear either. And so the curriculum was always in the back of my head. Okay, this is what I should be doing, but I would leave them to their own devices largely. So we tended in our home education to just cover English and maths. And because to me, they were the core pieces. Everything outside of that could be something that they learned on an ad hoc basis and did. But outside of that, as long as they had numerical ability and they had good literacy skills, everything else was possible. And so they discover the world of books. They were able to satisfy their own curiosities using all the tools, kind of, library, internet, etc. themselves. And I watched them follow their own passion. And my eldest in particular, he really, he learns in a really interesting way. He batch learns. And in the beginning, when I saw this, he would, be fascinated with woodwork, and he would totally immerse himself in everything that was related to woodwork. At the age of 9, he set up a little Christmas stall. He negotiated the stall with the commissioner. I, as an adult, had to be there. He created these beautiful wooden decorations, decorated them, made them by hand himself. Got some beautiful local ribbon to tie them in, set up the stall, organized everything, and sold an absolute, made a fortune, sold them all out. And but then he was done with woodwork, and my upbringing said, oh God, no, he's throwing in the towel, he's giving up, this is just not good, he's never going to stick at anything. And then I thought, hang on a second, just let's see, how this is going. And then he moved on to cubing, and he became a speed cuber, able to do the Rubik's Cube in about 5-6 seconds. And he drilled himself. He learned online from YouTubers who were, speed cubers farther down the line than him. He competed in it just before COVID. And that's just the way he learned. So he was the one, I suppose, who set the trail, because we watched how he progressed, and then we were able to tweak it to the others who followed as well and let them do the same. But he was very specific in his style of learning. The others were more, they went at it with a more gentle pace, but always driven by their own curiosities. So we didn't try and steer them anyway in particular. We never tried to put them in classes that they really didn't want to do. We would encourage them to try something, and if they really hated it, absolutely, that's fine, just come away. But they were constantly trying things, and then they would make up their own minds. So to me, that's the way education should be. I don't think that's failing them by giving them a choice. We, as home educators, we get a lot of pushback on how, the responsibility that we have, and keeping them, excluding them from society. And to me, that's just nonsense, because I see all three of them are very, very social individuals. They have more social interaction on a daily basis than a child in school, in my opinion, because they're constantly interacting. There's constant conversation between us when we're out in the supermarket, library, pool, wherever we are. They have the confidence to interact with adults. They don't see adults kind of generally as somebody they should fear or somebody they should shy back for. They see me stepping forward and engaging, whatever, so they just model the same. Whereas, the school setting, because of the numbers, they have to manage them in a particular way. And that's no disrespect to the schools. I have huge respect for teachers. I think the system that they're working in is very onerous. It's very difficult. There's such expectations of them. And trying to manage delivering a curriculum with the behavioral issues that are in schools, I just don't even know how they cope on a day-to-day basis. So it's not a pop at schools. I just think the system is broken. So I didn't want to put my kids into that. So I wanted them to have a normal experience of life. And that's, for us, what home education has given them. And so as two of them now have transitioned to secondary school, in the beginning of the secondary school, they didn't know how to position to them or how to perceive them, and they had all these preconceptions that we would have a very strict list. And when I asked in the beginning as well as to, typically the year 7s were not allowed to come home for lunch, that's the rules of the school, and I pushed and said, well, actually, to me, that's based on the child should have the option to stay in school if they want to have lunch in school, or come home, because we're walking distance from the school. So we pushed on a few things, and they felt, their perception was that it was the parent who wanted the child home for school. And I thought, no, to me, it's about choice. So if my kid has had enough in school by the time we get to lunchtime and they need a break, as my eldest did on several occasions. He's got a safe space here, you know, in our general living area or in his own room. So if he needs to take time away, then he can do that. And I think that's something that kids struggle with because, you know, especially when you're in secondary school, I'm sure the numbers are much bigger with you, but here our secondary school has 1,000 in it. And coming from a child who, you know, the home education group that they would interact with might be 20, 30 kids at max. So to make that transition, it's a massive step. So to have that safe space to step out if you need to, you know, that to me is a basic human right. So to enforce kids to stay in that really overwhelming environment for some of them, you know, for these set times, I think it's unrealistic and I think it's unfair. So I wanted to give them an opt-out if they so chose. So to me, it's about respecting their needs. Yes, I understand there's rules that need to be followed to keep them safe, etc. But you know, at that stage, at secondary age kids, you know, there's a certain level of responsibility. So yeah, but we just kind of go with the flow in it. And to me, there's two main things about home education. It's preserving their love of learning and it's respecting their needs. And that's at the heart of everything we do. And, you know, I see parents regularly say to me, my God, how do you get them to, really engage with their homework and whatever? And I'm like, well, I don't. They're driven by their curiosity. I'll support them and facilitate whatever they need, but I'll never push them to do it. Because, you know, some of the things I see them bringing home, I'm thinking, really, what's the point in this? But, you know, just reserve comment. My eldest, again, last Christmas, he was really into French and all his Christmas presents were French based. You know, grammar books, vocabulary, dictionary, all these different things and he wanted, which wouldn't be typical presents for, you know, a 13-year-old boy. But that was what he wanted. He was fascinated with the language and he wants to learn as much as he possibly could. So, you know, it's always driven by them. And that's, to me, what successful learning looks like, or raising a child who has a love of learning, because I have that as an adult. And, you know, to me, that's an amazing gift to be able to give a child, and a nice way to work your way through life and through the world with that curiosity and always interested, not to have that negative association of learning because it's been enforced on you and because you've been told that you need to do X, Y, and Z. It's a very different experience, and people find that strange sometimes. But, you know, to me, it's based on how we cultivated with them their love of learning, which was priceless.
And do you feel like now that two of them are in mainstream school, has that lost any love of their learning, or because you embedded it in them when they were younger, it's just continued?
Yeah, no, it's continued because my daughter is the exact same. She's a totally different character. She's a little perfectionist, a bit of a worrywart, but she just loves getting, you know, the homework that she has. It's different to things we would have done before. And no, I don't think so. Because to me as well, the primary home education, them at primary stage, they're formative years. You know, there's differing opinions on what age are those key years, but to me, definitely the early years from 0 to 7 or 8, they often say, are really formative in terms of their psychology. So I think we embedded that from a very young age, and I think that's kind of foundational to where they're where they'll go from here. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Who knows? But for now, I think we've been successful in, you know, preserving that love of learning, which to me is, I see it dampened in so many kids around me, and I just think it's sad because they have a negative association with learning. And, you know, to me, it's a fascinating world, the world we live in, and everybody has their own interests. And to try and pigeonhole it or put it in, you know, in a box in a very particular way, it just doesn't appeal. And we've got so many kids who learn in different styles, but I get that, you know, school can't facilitate that. It's just not possible. But for as parents to be able to do that outside school, then, you know, if we can, then that's a great thing to be able to support with our kids.
So I don't know what it's like there, but here any parent can select to home educate, like you can choose to do that. Is that the case where you are as well, that you could just call up the local authority and say, I'm off rolling my young person, because my child, not young person, Is that how it works?
Pretty much. Yeah, I think it does vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Here, yes, it's fine. You just have to register the fact that you are, you're home educating them. That's it. So from a child safety perspective, they know, they have an address, they know who the primary caregiver is, etc. But yeah, we've had no issues. When we were in Ireland, we had to, when we registered, we were subjected to an inspection, and we had to demonstrate that we were suitably qualified to deliver education to our child, which, at the time we didn't think anything of it. Looking back on it, we think, well, okay, hang on a second. Now that we've seen lots of parts of the education system, we kind of think, oh my God, I think that was a bit cheeky to do. It's not really permitted to do that here. But it depends on the jurisdiction you're in as to what kind of controls they can have on the home educated children in their area. So it can be quite contentious. We're lucky enough here, we don't really have any regulation on us. We don't have inspections or anything like that. It is a huge responsibility, like as a parent, to, it is 24/7. There's no let up from it. We don't have any family where we live at the moment, so there's just it is a vocation. You're constantly on it, and they don't stop learning. Learning is not a 9 to 3:30 thing with our kids. It's whenever they've got questions at any stage. So it's fairly demanding as a parent, but seeing now sort of the fruits of our labor, it's definitely been worthwhile. But I have to say, it has probably cost me, I put a lot of my life on hold. I stepped away from my job, my career, etc. And then I found myself in the position of being financially dependent because I had no income, and that caused a lot of problems for me. So I don't ever regret doing it, but there is a huge cost associated to it, to the primary parent who does kind of take on that mantle. But it's very, very rewarding to see your kids. I mean, yeah, especially again, my eldest, who was sort of breaking the mold when he started in a secondary. The amount of after schools he had the first year was just insane, because he was trying to understand the system, as all the other kids were aware of, and he pushed it too far on a few occasions, and he pushed it just to a level that I was comfortable with on many occasions. And we came in right behind him saying, absolutely, you were well within your rights to say that, to stick up for kids being accused of stuff that, just really didn't make sense. But they, as kids who were coming from the system, from primary school, they were used to that and they accepted that. But he was like, no way, this is just not okay. So I loved the fact that he would challenge that and have the confidence to do that with no preconceptions that he would be reprimanded for it. Now, he learned quickly as to how the system worked, what he needed to do and say to work around it. And I do think, we get pushback from home education parents thinking, you're failing your child. You've home educated them to primary. Like, why would you put them into secondary now? And I kind of think, well, I need a break. I need to get my own life back. I needed to get that income back when we lost our other income. And I think it's important that kids have balance. And we do live in a world that has a lot of systems, and you need to know how to work in that world, because no matter which angle you go at it, you're going to have to engage with the system in various respects. So to understand that at a school level is actually quite a good thing to be able to know, so that you can navigate whatever it is, whether it's getting a job or, working with people that really are difficult to work with, or whatever. I think that part is actually really important to a child. So I think it's a good way to have. We've kind of we've got a foot in both worlds, and they understand both now, which is a better way, I think.
That's really interesting. I don't know what I thought you were going to tell me, but yeah, I'm listening like, oh, right, okay, cool. So my question is, you said that you got checked once, but where you are now, you don't really get checked, which my understanding is there isn't much checking involved in home education. Do you have any concerns, or do you know of anyone that the system might have let a child down because they might have said somebody might be being home educated and not being given all the support and nurture and knowledge that you are supplying for your children?
Yeah, I haven't come across that in our community, thankfully. I have come across a lot of kids who have been off-rolled from their schools, because they cause problems, because they bring grades down, and nobody knows where they are. They're not part of our home education group, and they're not in school, so they're falling between the stools. So those kids that I would worry about, but we have no sight of them. The school had sight of them, and for various reasons, they're off-rolled. And I don't like that. I don't like, those kids, because they potentially are kids who are vulnerable. And
Yes.
who's looking out for them? They're probably coming from homes where maybe they do or they don't care for whether they receive a suitable education or not. I don't know. It's not my place to judge, but there's definitely a chunk of kids that are falling between the cracks, and I would worry about them. But again, it's a system. Who's going to pick those up? Look, who's going to actually follow up with those kids? Their numbers. So that does concern me, because the home education community that we're part of, we have one of the biggest pushbacks we get as home educators is, the social piece, like, how your kids won't be able to, liaise with anybody. But we have here a lot of classes. So we have a sports class for our home ed group on a Monday. We have art on a Tuesday. We have engineering and forest school on a Friday. And then they're specifically home educated classes during school time. And then they have all their other extracurricular activities. So like tonight, I've got 3 at hockey. And there's always stuff on for them. But those kids in that middle, it's impossible to know who has responsibility for them, and are they okay? I don't know. That is a concern for me.
I think it's fantastic that you didn't build the community, but you are part of a community that exists because, like you say, when you're no longer in mainstream, then there's not somebody watching over those young people. So the fact that you've come together, and I'm assuming that you have to pay for those things that you do, so then you can help share costs. So you put however many kids in a project, it's only going to cost you a couple of quid instead of paying like 40 quid each. So I think that's brilliant. Yeah, and you can tailor the curriculum for your children the way that you think it should be. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. But you're right. I think there is a gap where there are some young people that have been off-rolled, which is illegal, or some parents maybe have been encouraged to self-educate so that their child stopped getting in trouble. And if they don't join one of these communities, even if they had great intentions, I think it could be potentially quite difficult to fulfill the requirements to be a home educator, because you must have had to do a lot of research. Like, it's a lot of work, like it's a full-time vocation, you were saying. So I do worry for those young people, and I'm sure some of them are doing spectacular, but I'm sure there are some that are not, and so I'd like to reach out to work
I
with
know.
those young
But
people.
then equally, there are kids in school who are on the register who are not okay as well. So,
That's
I
true.
think
That's true.
there's problems everywhere. I mean, one big thing I've seen, like, our numbers have nearly doubled over COVID because of the issues that so many parents saw, that when the kids were out of school, they were different, and they really came back to themselves. They'd been struggling in school, and the parents didn't join the dots on it, that it was actually the school setting that was causing the problems for these particular children. And so when they were home during COVID, when they were doing all the classes from home, they saw their kids return to who they were originally, and so they joined the dots on it. So our community nearly doubled during COVID. We get a lot of kids who have special needs who
Mm.
join the community because it's very conducive to support whatever method of learning that suits them best. And the parents, a lot of them have made sacrifices with jobs. They have to cut their expenses to be able to afford that, and that is a massive bugbear of mine. That the average kid, I think an Ofsted inspector told me, it costs to educate them in primary is about £6,000. All of everything we do, we're pretty much providing private education for our children at our own expense. So we generally, most it's mainly mums who do it. There's a few dads. We've had to give up our income. So and on top of that, then we have to pay for all the classes that they have. There's no tax breaks, and yet we're saving the system a fortune. And more often than not, we get abused for doing what we're doing with our kids. We're some kind of extremists or whatever. People don't understand like what home education is, and they meet us and they think, "Oh, you're actually kind of normal," and we think, "Well, okay, but that's your preconception as to what home education is, some kind of hippy dippy, living just on moonbeams and Mother Nature." It's just like, well, no. All the families I know, they're really normal families. There's nothing strange about them. They just feel that this was a better option for their kids. It's that simple. So
Cool.
it's interesting.
If somebody was thinking of home educating their child or children, where would you advise them to look for advice or support?
Usually your local authority or your council, depending on who it is that has authority over that, will have information as to what the rules are in your area. There's a lot of Facebook groups online for specific local areas wherever you live, and there's bigger ones like for the UK. There's a big home education group. So they're probably good places to start, and just asking around, because a lot of people are surprised that actually people that they know might be 1 degree away are actually home education. So when you start to ask, you start to discover people that you didn't realize, oh, that's why I see those kids out of school. Oh, they're home educators. And when you become aware of them, then you see them all over the place. So online, Facebook is a good place to start, I think, for home education groups.
Thank you so much. I actually have loads more questions, but I know that you have to go. So maybe we'll do another follow-up episode at another time. But thank you so much for your time, Caitriona. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Always happy to chat.
Cool. Thank you. Bye. Phimfinch was set up to empower young people with the tools and confidence to achieve success. If you'd like to be part of our journey, please check out our website www.phimfinch.co.uk or email us at info@phimfinch.co.uk.